Simply put, we can fund important projects and invest in Chicago, but we don't have to mortgage our children's future and saddle them with reckless debt to do it.
We're not mortgaging the future of our children. In fact, we are building the roads that they're going to use.
Despite major pushback from a number of alders, Chicago City Council narrowly approved Mayor Brandon Johnson's controversial $830 million borrowing plan last week. Critics say the infrastructure deal could cost the next generation of Chicagoans more than double that amount. The final deal did include language limiting how and where the money can be spent, and that includes tighter restrictions on funds for Chicago public schools. But efforts to delay the vote or change the repayment plan, those were blocked by the mayor's allies. 43rd Ward Alderman Timmy Knutson joins me this morning in our WGN studios. Alderman, thanks for spending part of your Sunday with me.
Thank you for having me on, Paul.
So actually, first I want to go to some news that happened on Friday.
Sure.
Which was the appointment by Mayor Johnson. We knew about the resignation of the superintendent of Chicago Park District, but then we get a new superintendent, and it's your colleague, Alderman Carlos Ramirez Rosa. And now, by the way, the mayor gets to appoint a replacement for him. How political is all of this, or is this just maybe a good move for the city? What's your take?
Well, it sounds pretty political, right? What I would say is this role, superintendent of the Chicago Park District, this is a role that's a lot of people's dream job. That's people we could have done an interview process from the private sector, from the philanthropic sector, and found someone who has a resume that fits this, who wants to build out our parks, who can fundraise the money to do so, and has a vision. I don't know exactly Carlos's resume on this, but what I do know is within recent history this past year, he was asked to step down from leadership on the Committee of Zoning that I serve on council. And I just don't know that bad behavior should be rewarded in this way.
Oh, and that was because of some interaction that happened in a city council meeting, right? So
yep, disrespect towards my colleague and friend, Alderperson Emma Mitz.
Okay. Maybe that was an opportunity for Rosa to say, okay, it's time to move on, and this is a good place for me to go. I don't know.
Well, it's a top place for him to go. So my counter to that is I think a lot of private sector leaders or philanthropic leaders would have done a great job in this role had there been a process.
All right. Let's talk about big news from this week, $830 million bond. It passed on Wednesday. It's all supposed to go to infrastructure. You voted against it.
Yep.
And so about half your colleagues voted for it. It took Johnson, the mayor, to actually break a tie. But Pat Dowell, one of your colleagues who's sort of been down this road before, she's chair of finance, and she said, look, this is the way we do things. You know, we pay for it in the future. And then essentially we come to learn, look, we're paying the bills for our parents and our grandparents, and our kids and grandkids, they'll pay our bills. That's just the way it works. What's your take? Did you agree with the projects that are being funded by this $830 million, given that you voted no?
You know, I do agree with the projects. I do. I think there's no argument that different parts of the city need a lot of infrastructure investment. My reason for voting no was really the deal we got with it. I don't disagree with Chairwoman.
The repayment.
The repayment, yes. I don't disagree with Chairwoman Dowell that, you know, municipal debt, this is how it functions. It is amortized over time. That being said, there's a lot of fear over how this is paid back based on the first scenario that came out of the administration that showed much more in interest being paid into over time.
Well, it was only for 20 years,
principal.
It was solely interest, right? The principal didn't kick in for 20 years.
Interest only, right. So therefore, I immediately filed an amendment that I hope will get my colleagues' support. And what that amendment does is it sets guardrails on the chief financial officer of the city on how they pay back this debt. A lot of people don't realize this, but when we pass a bond authorization, the payment structure is not attached to it. Our city's CFO has flexibility in how it's paid back over time. CFO and next few CFOs, right? Because this is being paid back over 30 years. So the guardrails my amendment will set will save us potentially hundreds of millions of dollars over time. And I'm trying to stress to my colleagues the importance of us putting those into writing.
Just so viewers understand, they might say, okay, that sounds like a good idea. Why didn't that get passed and made part of this bill? That would have saved millions of dollars here.
It was too aggressive. Right, and I think, but I can hopefully.
Or was it also the timing of when it got introduced?
Well, I would say both. No, I've been advocating for a better payment structure throughout this process. Right, there hasn't been too much negotiation that went on, which is why I stayed no. When we're working with the CFO on making sure that this works, that the CFO has flexibility to react to hard years in certain times, and make sure that we are going to amortize. But this amendment would require that there are no years of interest-only payments. It would cut years off the back end, and would make it so we pay more in principal than interest over time. It would save us a lot of money, and I'm hoping to get my colleagues on board, even those who just voted for this bond structure.
You know, as I said in the lead-in to you, not many changes got made to this. A lot of people were trying to get Johnson to change the amount or various things.
Yeah.
The only thing he did do in terms of bowing to, I guess, pressure, because he didn't change payment terms, but he said, look, I will agree that this money will go to these capital projects, infrastructure projects. We're not going to use it for a more controversial non-teacher CPS pension fund. Can that be trusted? Is that in the deal? Is it confirmed? And was any of that related to your no vote?
You know, the legal writing was updated as a part of their internal amendment. And I think, you know, Chicagoans understand our need for the infrastructure projects. Also, for the couple hundred cars that are being purchased for CPD, CFD, and Department of Streets and Sands, there's some good stuff in there. Again, once that language got in there, it was more about the deal that we cut and making sure that we don't just get crushed in interest by kicking the can into the future.
There wasn't. Well, one of your colleagues made the comment of saying, by the time we are buying those cars and by the time we actually start paying principal, those cars will already be long gone and done. You agree?
We'll see.
Okay. So talking about CPS, the mayor did call on the board to borrow the money they need to take care of their problems. Is that the right approach?
You know, it's so tricky right now with CPS, and we do not have, as alder people, we don't have additional insider views into their negotiation. We're boxed out a bit, right? So I've been very clear in advocating during this process. At first, it was, all right, we need the CEO to stay. Pedro is negotiating on good terms as a good faith actor. When he left, it really went up for grabs, and we're not getting much insight into that. We need a healthy CPS, but again, you know, if I was there, if I was on the Board of Education, which I'm not, but we help some good people get on there, I'd be advocating for smarter deals. Fiscal stability is front and center on the minds of Chicagoans because they understand that's how we pay for social services over time. It's all attached, and we need to be making better decisions.
A few things in the time we have left. First of all, the Bears. We hear they come out a little bit. They're moving things a little more forward with Arlington Heights, but hey, we want to stay in the city. And Mayor Johnson said he wants them there. Any insight you can give us on what's going to happen?
You know, no, I have no insight on that deal. What I can say is, you know, the coach announcement at the end of the year brought a lot of excitement. And I'm excited to cheer for them, again, as not the most athletic alderperson on city council. So don't ask me too much about the team.
Not the most athletic anchor either. And I want to ask you about speed cameras, 50 new ones coming.
Yeah.
Now I have this memory. I'm old enough to remember when people were really mad about speed cameras, they would bother your offices and say, get rid of them. A lot of aldermen said, yeah, we got to get rid of these. Now we get 50 new ones. Is this about safety, or is this, at this point, is this about money? You
know, to be honest, I think it's a mix of both. Recently, council turned down a reduction to the speed limit. We hear a lot from our residents on the need for pedestrian and vehicular safety, slowing down the cars. I mean, in the 43rd Ward, we just had residents petition for us to get a camera. There are people who want these cameras, sometimes keeping people safer when it also is checking off the box of us increasing revenue for the city is a good thing. That being said, I don't want these cameras everywhere, right? There's places for them to be, and the 50 cameras that were funded, think of it, there's 50 wards. So this is one camera per ward, and we have the right, if we would like, to say no.
At least you should still go 30 miles an hour. That didn't pass to lower that one.
Right.
Alderman Timmy Knudsen of the 43rd Ward. Thank you so much for being with me. I appreciate your time. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. All right, we're going to take another break. After this, the lasting impact of President Trump's policies in Illinois. What Governor Pritzker and his team are saying as budget negotiations get underway at the State House. Don't go anywhere.